So thank you so much for welcoming me back. That's going to be a difficult thing to follow. I hope the person is all right and that everything is good. Can we get a round of applause for the super fast response from Free Aid? Like within seconds, they had a doctor down here to investigate and make sure the guy was going to be all right. So absolutely phenomenal. Kudos to the Free State Project for arranging Free Aid and for making all of that happen. And even kudos to the Lancaster ambulance who got here within about 10 minutes, I think. Very well done. Impressive. So I hate to get too much back into FSA credits because it's a topic I hate because I heard about it nonstop for 11 months. But the Second Chance Act being done at the end of the month means that they do the paperwork right before your release date is going to lower. And then the paperwork date doesn't change. So they intentionally screw you out of 2 weeks of halfway house. And they do this knowingly and on purpose, and there's constantly inmates filing writs of habeas corpus and appeals and other nonsense that's not going to work. But everyone needs hope while in federal prison, and that's what they did to get their hope. But for the most part, I was comfortable. It was okay. I had a lot of really good friends there, a lot of really awesome people that I was able to hang out with, and it wasn't bad. At first, I missed the big things in life, my friends, my family, the things you would expect to miss. But as time goes on, you make peace with that and you start to miss like the little things. And you sit there one night brushing your teeth thinking, man, it was great when I could brush my teeth and not have someone like taking a crap 5 feet from me. Those were good days, weren't they? That's how it changes over time. But I was comfortable because of the Spanish people that I was close with. Then the Nazi arrived. The actual, he was not known to be a member of the Nazi Party, however. He is a German, former Marine, homophobic, racist guy who said nothing but Nazi stuff and who had Mein Kampf in his cell. So I don't know what your criteria is of a Nazi, but that pretty much checks off all of them for me. And he hated me immediately. Now, this was at a camp where there's not a lot of violent crime that's known about by the government. And this is because the people who end up in these camps, most of the drug dealers and the gangsters, like Flip, the Spanish gangster from Brooklyn, they may or may not have done some violent things in the past, but they never got caught with those. And they're in the upper tiers of their individual societies, so they're not the ones who get charged with having bodies under them. They're not the ones who get charged with murder because they're never actually literally connected to it. But a lot of the people there had bodies under them and had, killed some people. But Flip had left by that point, right around the time the Nazis showed up, and this dude did nothing but call me a faggot the entire time. I smacked this dude at least 6 times, and he just never stopped. He would stop for about a week, and then he would just get right back to it. He was also a snitch, which happened a lot there. But a lot of people left while I was there. Flip was the first of the people that I had become really close to who left. When they say revolving door prisons, they really meant it. I thought at 18 months that I was going to be one of the shorter sentences. No, I was one of the longer sentences there. By the time I left, there were only 10 inmates in that unit who had been there longer than I had. Other people there was one guy in New York who received a 56-day federal sentence. Now that's just enough to ruin your entire life, to make sure you lose your job, that you can't pay your rent, that your electricity gets cut off. That's a horrible thing to do to a person, and it wasn't uncommon. We did have a new warden arrive in January, or December, I don't know, sometime during the winter. And that was when the facility went from, okay, this is tolerable, this is manageable, to, oh my God, this sucks. SIS is the prison police force, their special investigative services. And once this new warden came, the SIS tore us apart every single week. And they always found something, because we were at a camp. If you want your visitor to bring you a cell phone, all they have to do is put it in their pocket and walk in with it. And then they hand it to you. You have to get it in somewhat creatively. But they're not going to pat search your crotch. They're not going to strip search you. And so people would just get cell phones and bring them right in. Or vapes or cigarettes or whatever. And look, I'm not spilling inmate secrets here. The staff knows this. They just don't care because it's usually not a problem. And they know they can't keep it out anyway. They're lazy, as you would expect from government employees. And they just don't want to do paperwork. I literally had a CO, a cop, a correctional officer, when I was talking to Flip and a few Spanish people one night, come through and say, look, I know someone around here has been vaping, like just when you hear our keys, stop doing it because I don't want to do the paperwork. Like just put it away and I will keep walking, but if I see it, I got to do something about it, so don't let me see it. And we all knew this was true because like he's a government employee, they're all lazy, but to actually hear one of these guys say that they know there's vapes here, they know there's cell phones, and they don't care, they just don't want to see it, that was a strange thing. And of course he could have been lying because cops lie and he was a cop, but I don't think that he was. But these materials, this contraband, which is a word I hate because only cops use the word contraband. So if you're in federal prison and someone's like, hey, I know where we can get some contraband, like, yeah, thanks, officer. Anyone who calls it that is probably an informant or a snitch, or, I mean, that's pretty much the same thing, or they are actually working for the BOP because to the other person, like, that's just his stuff. He's not like, this is my contraband, this is my stuff. But the punishment for having a vape or a pack of cigarettes or a cell phone is completely disproportionate to the crime. And this created a huge issue at this facility because if you get caught with the vape, you go to the SHU, segregated housing unit, solitary confinement, for 30 days. And when you get out, you don't have commissary for 6 months. You're not allowed visits for 6 months. Your phone privileges are restricted. And during your time of solitary confinement, you're allowed one 15-minute phone call per month. That's torture. By any standard of definition of torture, that's absolutely torture. And that's the punishment just for having a vape, something that nicotine addicts need in order to stop their withdrawals from nicotine. Now, if you're on heroin, man, they got your back. They will give you all the Suboxone you want. There was this dude named Stryker at this facility. I don't know what the hell dose they had him on, but he would take it and he would just like hang his feet off his top bunk with his head held back and just passed out for hours. And you're sort of envious of this when you see the guy because he's just sleeping away his whole prison sentence. But they probably should have lowered that dude's doses, but they won't do any of that for the nicotine addicts. They won't give you a nicotine patch or nicotine gum or any of these other things they could easily do. It's like, no, you get to suffer through it, but the heroin addict, we got him covered. Or the meth addict, they got him covered. And to solve this problem, obviously people bring in vapes, some cigarettes, but it's a lot harder to get away with smoking cigarettes, obviously. But vapes were very common and they would hide them in common areas, because the punishment for getting caught with it was disproportionate. Well, when they find it in a common area, they punish everyone. The entire unit, we lose television for 3 weeks, commissary, at one point we lost commissary for 5 weeks, which incidentally turned out to be a violation of the Geneva Convention because they weren't selling us stamps, they weren't allowing us to use the computers, they weren't allowing us to buy basic hygiene items, and they weren't providing them because it's horrifically mismanaged. It's exactly as mismanaged as you would expect if the DMV was tasked with keeping human beings alive, because that's what this was. So of course, they never had any toilet paper, and they wouldn't let you buy toilet paper on commissary. No, they had to provide that to you, but they would never do that on time, so inmates were constantly bartering with toilet paper they had stolen from the staff bathrooms, because that was the only way to get it. The hand soaps in the bathroom were always empty, and it was an ordeal to get more. The staff would have to come back and watch you put it in, like, dude, we're just trying to wash our hands before we go cook. Now, obviously, winter happened, and COVID-19 happened again. Thankfully, they did not force us all to wear masks this time. That was years ago, apparently, where they did that. And they punished one guy for not wearing his mask in the shower. Now, I only heard about this colloquially, but I did hear about it from the guy. He got out of the shower, and one of the COs came through and said, hey, why aren't you wearing your mask? And he's like, well, I just stepped out of the shower. That's why I'm not going to shower with it on. He lost his phone privileges for 30 days for that answer. So thankfully, I was able to avoid most of that. But the BOP and the brilliant geniuses there decided that the best way to handle the outbreak of COVID-19 in the facility, because every single damn one of us got sick, because we're all sharing a building together, was to give us all breathalyzer tests, while also making our visitors wear masks. And you did have to wear a mask if you went to a visit for one whole day, and then they forgot they put that policy in place, which was convenient for us because we didn't want to wear them anyway. However, while coming out of these visits, where they had forced me to wear a mask, there's like, hey, stop and breathe into this breathalyzer that we just had these other 5 inmates breathing into, and that way, if they have COVID, you can get it too. Now, they didn't say that, but that's obviously what's going to happen. That happened to be the exact same weekend that the bathrooms were out of soap and all the staff was gone. I'm not saying they let us get sick on purpose. I'm saying they let us get sick on stupid, which checks out because they are pretty stupid. But all of these things with the vapes being found or the cell phones being found, it put me in a really weird position because I was adopted by the Spanish car, right? They called me Carol G, who's this Hispanic singer. I don't know anything about her beyond that, except she does have red hair. But the white car there were really angry because the Spanish people weren't taking responsibility for the vapes and the cell phones, and everyone knew they belonged to the Spanish. Like that, everyone knew that, and that was true. And I had to sort of point out to these people that, like, you guys have actual rats that are going to the cops all the time about these things, and that's why we keep getting hit by SIS. And you're not doing anything about your rats, so they're not going to do anything about the people with the vapes. And that lasted for a really long time. But it was weird for me because I've always hated the fact that I'm from Mississippi because Mississippi it's the worst state in the United States by a huge margin. If it's a bad thing, then Mississippi's at the top of the list, and if it's a good thing, Mississippi is at the bottom of the list every single time. But in federal prison, this actually proved to be really helpful because people would tell one another, don't mess with Aria. She's from Mississippi, man. She'll stand up for herself. Which was weird, but fortunate, and I was very happy to see it. But they don't want you to have cell phones, obviously. They say it's because they don't want you to have external communications they can't monitor. But the real reason, I believe, is because on one night in about February, sewage just started pouring up into the bathroom from the floor drains and out of the toilets and out of the sink drain, not the sink drains, but the bathroom just became filled with it. And it flooded out into the hallways. And we were told, yeah, this isn't going to be fixed tonight. Good luck, guys. Luckily, there was a bathroom on the opposite side of the building, but because of all of this, they didn't work. And I thought that was the worst, right? But if I had had a cell phone then, I would have absolutely taken the risk of going live on Twitter or YouTube like, hey, guys, so look, I'm in federal prison, and there's sewage everywhere. Like, this is a violation of every concept of human rights. But it gets worse, because one day I went to work in the kitchen, and sewage had backed up into the walk-ins. You know, the walk-in cooler, where you keep all your food, flooded with sewage. And they expected us to continue using that food that was in there. Absolutely disgusting. I'm convinced the public would have been outraged by these things, but I think the public would be outraged anyway by the sheer stupidity of the existence of these camps. They're not fenced in. There's no guards. There's one CO who sits in what we call the bubble. It's just an office, and he plays on his phone or on his computer. He doesn't walk around and do anything. We literally walked in and out the front door in order to go to the rec yard. There was just a line on the road out there that said, don't cross that line or you're out of bounds. But there was nothing stopping you from, your visitors could come and you could just walk out the front door with them and get in the car. Again, it's a terrible idea to do that. But they called it minimum security, but in reality, it was no security. There were no bars on the windows at all. And you could even take some of the windows out. And because of this, some people actually left at night. After the 12 o'clock count, they would just leave out the windows and go meet their girlfriends or whatever for a few hours and come back before the 3 o'clock count. People did get caught doing this, but it did happen. And in any instance during this, someone could have just decided to leave and not come back. And people are pouring thousands of their own dollars into tax money in order to pay for this nonsense. Every single person there should have been under home confinement because you could have achieved the exact same goal with one probation officer monitoring people's home confinement that you needed these 30 Bureau of Prison staff members to achieve. Very, very disgustingly low security and very disgusting, just the fact that it existed. Eventually, because of these collective punishments, someone organized a letter writing campaign to the regional people who were supposed to oversee our facility. The obvious result of this was that regional came out and we got the hell beat out of us for like 3 weeks by SIS and just the staff who were upset that someone had written 30-something letters to regional about these things. What they decided to do, the worst punishment, was to take some of the showers, because there was this large room that contained the bathrooms and the showers. There were 16 in there, but only 10 of them actually worked, which checks out for government. And they took out 5 of them, taking us down to only 5 working showers for a unit of 80-something people in the middle of April. It was very petty behavior, but what can you do about it? They said, oh, we're going to put in new ones. Yeah, but you were putting in televisions over here when I got here. Like, they moved me out of a cell. They said, you can't be here. You got to go over there because we're going to knock down this wall and put in televisions here. I was like, okay, cool, whatever. I mean, I got to move, I got to move. By the time I left, they still had not knocked down that wall or put in televisions. So these bathrooms, these new showers, they're never going to come into existence. And that kind of sucks for all the people who are still there. But one day, while cooking, it was actually May the 2nd. One of the unit secretary came in. He said, has anyone talked to you about leaving? Because I knew my release date was 3 weeks away at that point. I was like, well, I mean, not today. He's like, well, do you have a second to talk about it? Well, I've always got time to talk about that. Yeah, let's go. What's up? He goes, oh, well, you're leaving next week. Well, that's a great surprise, but why? And I ended up going to a halfway house for 2 weeks because of more BOP stupidity. 2 weeks in a halfway house is unheard of. No one does that. They just hold you in the prison until your actual release date. Even 3 weeks, they just hold you there. Anything less than a month, they just keep you in the prison until your release date. And they just say, nope, you don't get halfway house. But for whatever reason, they gave it to me. And I was supposed to have been there the week before, on April the 28th or whatever that comes out to be. And the only reason we even found out about this was because Hampshire House in Manchester called the Bureau of Prisons and was like, hey, you guys didn't respond to our emails, and Dimezzo was supposed to be here like a week ago, and like, what's going on? Is she gone? Is she in Mexico? What's up? And that was when we learned, oh, I got approved to go. And I went, and the halfway house was, I would have rather stayed in prison for the last 2 weeks, to be totally honest with you, because you have to leave all your stuff there. Not all of your stuff. I brought a lot of the books that people sent me. Thank you, by the way, to anyone out here who sent me books. I loved it, and I probably brought it with me because I brought this giant box of books that even the CEOs were like, we're not searching this, just go. But luckily, I was able to do that. Anyway, you do leave a lot of things and people behind, and that's one of the reasons that I didn't really think much about it when I got out, to continue emailing inmates who were still in the system. Now, in hindsight, yeah, obviously, this is going to piss off my probation officer. But at the time, I did not think about it. I was just like, these are people that I've lived with for the last 11 months. You can't take people away from their friends and family, force them to find new friends and family for 11 months, then take them away from those new friends and family and say, you're not allowed to contact them anymore. We don't do that to dogs. If you adopt a dog, chances are good at some point you're going to be like, you should go see your brother and sister again. But when it comes to human beings in prison, once you have that label of criminal fixed onto you, you become inhuman, not just to the justice system and not just to U.S. probation and the U.S. courts and just the American system in general, but to the average American. Using that word criminal allows all levels of horrors to be done to a person that no one thinks twice about. And one of those things is that, like, Flip was my best freaking friend, man. How can you tell me I can't have contact? You made him my best friend when you put me in this facility by taking me away by my other friends. So I'm looking forward to fighting that particular battle in court. Obviously, another one that I was emailing was Ian Freeman. That one I thought was going to be fine because, like, we have a court order allowing us to have contact because, we do the show together. That's important for the free speech rights and free press rights of Americans. Well, that didn't go over well at all either. I got blocked and banned by the warden. I'm currently appealing that, but wardens like to tell people no, as you would expect, so they're going to say no to that. But I'm looking forward to suing them. And I'm looking forward to suing the BOP over this because I've got them in writing, and they actually put it in writing, that they are going to continue violating their policy about transgender inmates in regard to me. So I immediately just printed that out and mailed it to friends like, hey, hold on to this. This is going to be really useful. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to be suing them over that, obviously, sometime in the near future, once things settle down, because when you come out of prison, I didn't expect this amount of chaos and anxiety and stress. I really didn't, because I knew the state of things that I was coming into. But I ended up starting back smoking. I quit smoking 2.5 years ago while facing all of this nonsense. And about a week after leaving the halfway house, I had restarted smoking cigarettes just from the sheer stress of it. They say you're not an activist when you're in prison. I'm not convinced that's true at all. I fought with the BOP the entire time I was in there, and it was a lot of fun for the most part. I did get burned out on it around February, but that wasn't the only activism I did. People found out that I was a really fast typer, I was intelligent, and I was able to create legal motions. So they would pay me in commissary to draft legal motions for them, for motions for compassionate release and motions for sentence reduction under this new law that went into effect in November. I did a ton of those. And one of the people that I did these for, the first one I did, he got released in December of that year as a result of the motion that I typed for him. So you absolutely can remain an activist in prison. You just have to be a little more careful about it because there will be consequences. But yes, I'm very happy about that. At least one person did get released early because of a motion that I wrote. And I hope he's doing okay. But I would like all of you to do me just the basic favor of writing Ian Freeman. Like, you can find it at freekeene.com. It's really simple. We also have a thing at the Free Talk Live site where you can come by, you can write a letter, take a few minutes, just write a paragraph. We'll mail it for you. Just write down your name and address so that the BOP is going to require that, so that we can drop in the mail. We'll take care of all that, right? He's in prison. He needs your letters. They'll help make his day better. But I'm open to questions if anyone has any. That's about all of the main features of the Bureau of Prisons in just the last year that I really want. It was boring. I mean, that's the crux of it. The entire experience was boring. And then the Nazi came, and it got a little less boring and a little more violent. But I'm not a violent person, which was a weird position for me to be in. But on the outside, you can just say, oh, no, you're a Nazi. Stay away from me. You can't do that in prison. He's in the same unit as you. You're going to see him, and he's going to carry on with his crap. You're going to have to get violent with him. And if you let him disrespect you, it just signals to all the other inmates that they can disrespect you. Prison's vicious like that, but it plays by its own rules, and most of them it's a microcosm of society. Everything is tit for tat. Like, hey, if I give you these bag of chips, what are you going to give me in return? But that same interplay exists on the outside. Prison just highlights it and strips it to its bare basic elements. But if you can make it in society, you could make it in prison. It follows the same basic rules. However, if anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy. Just come up and I will take them.
Would it have been possible to just avoid all the other things? Spend your time reading books and watching TV and just not have to do with it, stay away from them, or get your own cell away from everybody else?
Well, the BOP won't allow you to have your own cell. They consider it to be a suicide risk. Presumably, if you're going to commit suicide, you would have to be in your own cell because your cellmate would stop you or alert the staff or something. So they won't let you do that. I was pretty secular, and I did keep to myself a lot by reading because there was just nothing else to do, though. But that is what a lot of people do with their time. They stay to themselves. They sell you a tablet in federal prison, and then they'll rent you a movie, $5 per movie. You can watch it 1.5 times, and you have to rent it again. You can also only rent one movie at a time. So it's not very efficient, but it makes the BOP a lot of money. So they love these things. And that's what a lot of people did. They would rent a movie, they would lay in their bunk, they would watch their tablet this close to their freaking face, and then they would go and rent another one. And that was all they did the entire time. I didn't want to be that person. So I did spend a lot of my time exercising, playing chess. I worked on self-improvement as much as I could. Resumed meditating. I got up to about 3 hours of cardio every single day. And it passed the time, really. That's what it ultimately comes down to. If you're just sitting in your room reading, you're not passing the time quickly. And that's what everyone wants. So in theory, you could, but you wouldn't want to.
What if another person in prison beats you up? Does that give you the right to your own cell?
What if another person what?
Beats you up?
No, they would just put you in someone that you felt safe with, or someone who they knew would have your back. I didn't have that issue because I ended up bunking with where all the Spanish were anyway, and I was on great terms with them. My bunkmate was actually this Mexican guy we called Big J. Really good dude. But if you got beat up by someone, you would have to go there were a few fights that people got in trouble for. And they ended up in the SHU for a month or whatever. And then one of them got transferred to another facility. That's usually how they handle it. The person who gets beaten up gets transferred to a different facility.
Could you elaborate on what you were accused of? So, why did they go after you, and what did they say is the reason they went after you?
Well, they said because I operated an unlicensed money transmitting business, which I would still say was not true, though I did plead guilty to it, because money transmission requires a third party, like Cash App or Venmo or Western Union. You take money from one person and you send money to another person. That's money transmission. But when you're selling Bitcoin, you're just taking money from a person and you're giving them an asset or a product in return. And that's not money transmission. But the actual rules, the actual regulations about what money transmission was and wasn't, that wasn't allowed to be brought up at the trial because of the motion to dismiss that my attorney and I had filed. We pointed out that, look, this statute doesn't seem to actually apply. And the prosecutors argued that it did, obviously, but the judge seemed to disagree because it's like, all right, well, prosecutors, you're not allowed to reference the statute itself or the actual law that they're alleged to have broken, which in hindsight, that's crazy, isn't it? They put Ian on trial and they weren't allowed to even say what law he supposedly broke. And they got a guilty verdict on that. That's insane.
First of all, glad to have you back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Secondly, I would like to know what to do if this happens again. Like, I know a lot of us will really help. Like, what can we do to support you? What can we do to support Ian? Like, we went to the trials and stuff, but we feel like there's not much that we can do to help and support you and show that we're with you.
I appreciate that. I received a lot of letters when I was in prison, and they were all fantastic. I received a large number of pen pals. That is the single best thing you can do to help someone who is in prison. Just take a few minutes out of your day to... I received postcards from people that would have 1 or 2 sentences on them. It was fantastic because you come back from work, or I did at that time, and there would just be letters right there for me in my bunk. And like, hey, this is someone who loves me enough and cares about me enough to take time out of their day to write me a letter. And that's profoundly meaningful when you're in BOP custody. You're in a situation where you're not allowed to feel things. I watched an inmate's mother die, and he told me all he wanted to do was cry, but he couldn't because he was in federal prison. And the other inmates would not have taken that very well. And so when you're in prison, you're emotionally closed off. Those letters that you receive, just like messages that you receive in the horrible computer system, it's a connection to the outside that does allow you to actually feel the more positive human emotions like love and kindness and generosity and care versus the hatred, animosity, and negativity that constantly exist within the BOP system. And the letter is a gateway to that. And that's why writing prisoners' letters is so critically important. So the best thing that could be done for Ian Freeman would 100% be to write him a letter. So please do.
Who are who they say were victims of alleged or what they claimed were your criminal activity?
Right. Well, fun fact, the prosecutors are on the record in federal court saying, yeah, there's no victim here.
No victim,
No
no
victim.
crime.
Yeah.
Right.
I would certainly agree. And I was shocked that the prosecutors admitted that. The judge said something, is there any restitution or anything? And the prosecutor said, no, there's no victim.
Wow.
Well, yeah.
Did they offer a jury trial of 12 of your peers?
They said they did, but I actually had a conversation about this on Free Talk Live earlier that is going to be broadcast tonight, where I don't think they could find 12 people that would consider me their peers in New Hampshire to put on a jury, right? So they would say they did because what they mean by peers is just a U.S. citizen. But it's far more nuanced than that. But the injustice system does not recognize that. So they did offer me a trial, but when you go to trial, you end up with the harsher sentences, and I was going to lose anyway. And my attorney he was right with that particular call. So I didn't go to trial. They did offer me one, but the consequences of going would have outweighed any benefit of going. Thank you.
I follow you on Twitter, and I saw some tweets from you while you were...
You said you follow me on Twitter and you
saw
some
some tweets from you while you were in prison. And I'm assuming that someone had access to your account and was tweeting for you. If they knew that that was happening, would you have been punished for that? Or was that okay for you to do that?
It's unclear. If they don't like you, it's not okay to do it. But they also weren't willing to pick some of these fights with me. So they turned a blind eye to that at the very least. A few inmates there got in trouble just for mentioning Bitcoin over the messaging system. They're like, look, you can't do that. No more mentions of it. He just wanted to, he told his wife to sell some of their Bitcoin to buy a house. And the staff brought him in and said, look, if you mention Bitcoin again, you're going to lose your computer privileges for a month, which is a crazily disproportionate response to that, but that's what they did. So they do monitor your messages, obviously. They knew that someone was managing my Twitter, because I would, intermittently send her a message saying, hey, will you post this for me? And she would do it. They never brought it up with me. You're not allowed to publish under your own name in BOP custody, but I did that as well. So it's paperwork for them for the most part, and they don't want to do it. And they know I wouldn't have stopped if they'd been like, stop tweeting. I'm like, no, screw you. I'm going to keep doing it. Do your paperwork. Have fun. I'll do mine.
So there's a filter on the mic. Get right on it and say your question really close. If you're loud into it, you can hear all the words. Back, cut.
Hi, I loved your talk. How does buying stuff in prison work?
I'm sorry?
How does buying stuff in prison work?
You're allowed $180 per 2 weeks. It's not really every 2 weeks. It resets on the 1st and the 15th of each month. And they give you a list of all of the different things they sell. And every single item has a maximum number that you can buy. And within that, you have to spend, you're allowed to spend rather, $180 within those time frames, from like the 1st to the 15th and from the 15th to the 31st. You submit that, and then a week, not really a week later, 3 or 4 days later, the commissary truck shows up. They give you a big bag with your name on it with all your crap in it, and you take it back to your cell and you sort it out. It's a miserable experience, but it made me realize it's just DoorDash for prisons. And now I hate DoorDash as a result. I'm like, the DoorDash experience is exactly like receiving commissary from prison. Here's this horribly overpriced list of things you can buy, and then we'll bring it right to you at some point, probably, and you'll get terrible customer service. It's the identical experience. So I hate DoorDash now, but speaking of the markups, there's a 30% markup on everything that you buy from the BOP. If they buy pens for $1, they're selling them to you for $1.30. But they still manage to run out of money. Now, I don't know how bad you have to be at business to do that, but if you gave me 80 guaranteed customers who shopped every single month with a 30% profit margin, if I couldn't keep my books black, then I shouldn't be in business. Now, the BOP obviously should not be in business, but just marvel at managing to blow 30% in profits every single week. And actually, they had about 900 people doing that. So the markup sucks, but that's how the process basically went. You submitted your sheet of paper, and they would bring you your stuff. Thank you.
I'm so glad that you're out, though. It's so great to have you back. We were wondering if you were going to be here from last year when we saw you. You weren't sure if you were going to be here. So it's great to have you back. Thank you.
Thank you.
I had a question about the clothing in prison. What were the quality? Did you have to buy new? And what was that like? And what was sizing like and all of that?
Well, I was in a men's prison, so they offered me men's clothing for the most part. And if you're interested, I can get into having to deal with the transgender nonsense there, but it was horrible, and it wasn't pleasant at any point. However, for t-shirts and shorts and stuff, the only options there were men's clothes and men's sweatpants. They would provide you with your greens, that's what we called them, because it was prison jumpsuit greens, and it was the ugliest shade of green that you've ever seen. But they also had a brown t-shirt they would give you, but everything that you bought on commissary was gray. So the t-shirts that you could buy, they came in small, medium, large, extra large, all the way up to, I think, 6X. I didn't even know they made a 6X. But they never had smalls, they never had mediums available because people bought those immediately. They were all gray because, I don't know, you're not allowed to have color in prison. I don't know why they did that. But that's more or less what it was, and those counted against your spending limit, obviously. So the first thing you'd want to buy was sweatpants and a sweatshirt, because they're not going to give you that. They'll give you a big, thick jacket, but that's not comfortable to wear. And it's also that hideous shade of green. So everyone's always either wearing green or brown or gray, and then you get outside and you're like, hey, people are wearing color again. This is nice. But that's pretty much it. It's basic clothing. The quality wasn't bad, but it was made by I think it was Starter, if I remember right. So it was like Walmart brand clothing that they would order. Most of their orders came from Amazon. So they would just buy huge quantities of stuff from Amazon and get it shipped in. And then they would sell you that at a ridiculous profit margin. You're welcome.
Thank you so much for writing me and being on the schedule. I actually am very interested in how you were treated as a trans woman. I assume that the prison guards were completely unwilling to accept you as you are, but what about the people you became friends with?
Among the inmates, the inmates were fantastic. And again, a large part of that was because of Flip's influence, but even after Flip left, the inmates there were fantastic. The only issue I ever had with any of that was the Nazi, and he was by himself in it. The issue with the BOP was trickier because, yeah, technically they have a policy, but their policy's stupid and they don't know what it is. And I was the first trans person. They said that there were other trans people at this prison. That may or may not be true, I don't know, but I was certainly the first trans person ever at the camp, so they had nothing in place. And to order makeup and stuff like that, which you can get in there, you have to fill out a special purpose order and give it to the head of the psychology department who has to approve it, and then, no joke, like 3 months later, you will finally get the thing that you ordered. And I don't know why it takes so long, but it does. But the psychologist never came out to the camp. So, like, I would have to give it to the counselor. He'd be like, all right, I will take this to psychology for you at the main facility at sometime in the next few weeks. Some of the staff tried to be good about it. The medical staff did not. And they were the ones I fought with more than any. The psychology department as well gave me a certificate that said, you know, Aria Dimezzo has completed this thing and whatever, and it said his on it. So I took it back to her. I was like, hey, you know, I can't take this. This is wrong. And I don't care. I'm just going to throw the stupid certificate away. But the fact that they did that made me have to argue with them about it and request one that said her. Because they should, this is the psychology, they're the ones who oversee this. They're supposed to know better. And she says, oh, I didn't even realize that blurb was still on there. Yeah, I'll reprint you one and bring it out. You can keep that and throw it away or whatever. So obviously, okay, this is evidence, and I'm keeping it then. Because they're not allowed by policy to misgender you intentionally or repeatedly. And this was how I got them in writing saying that they were going to continue violating that policy, because the counselor brought me a printout with something on it where, sure enough, there for gender, it said male. And I brought this to the attention of the Transgender Executive Council and said, hey, you know, he gave me this printout, and here's the policy you guys have that any communications with an inmate have to include that inmate's preferred gender and not any other gender. And they're like, yeah, well, that doesn't apply here, and we're going to continue using the sex you were assigned at birth to refer to you in full violation of their actual policy. The health department, I had the same issue with another doctor they didn't know anything about trans health care. They're like, we have a guide that we follow, and that's all. They wanted to take my blood every single month. Now, I've been on hormone replacement therapy for about 7 years now. When someone starts that, you want to check their hormone levels once every 3 months or once every 6 months. But after 7 years, once a year is fine. But they wanted to treat me like a dipstick and a Honda Accord, and every single month they would call me in there to do a blood draw, and by November I was sick of it. And I said, no, I don't consider this. And she said, why not? I was like, because I don't. This is stupid. There's no reason you should have to draw my blood every single month. Like, are you a vampire? No? All right, then you don't need it. You don't need to do this. And they said, well, we might have to stop your hormones then. And I said again, well, do what you got to do, and I'll do what I got to do. They never followed through on that threat, thankfully. But a lot of little stuff like that just happened the entire time that I was there from staff members. And I've got logs of it and printouts of the various things they have said. Ultimately, one person from the medical division, health services, he did come down and talk to me. He's like, hey, look, there was an issue at Grand Prairie, which is like BOP headquarters. We didn't even know this has happened. You brought it to our attention, and we're going to get this fixed. So give us a few weeks, and we'll get it sorted out. I never heard anything else. But this was a result of me being misgendered repeatedly in the healthcare forums. I was like, guys, you can't treat me medically if you're constantly calling me male. And he said, well, I mean, we kind of have to for certain purposes. And I was like, well, actually, the latest research is that after a person has been on hormone replacement therapy, after a certain amount of time, there's no longer any medical benefit to considering them their birth sex. He was like, well, I wouldn't expect your local hospital to go that. I was like, then I wouldn't go to that local hospital. But they don't know anything about what they're doing. They just follow a policy and hope for the best. Yeah, follow it badly, yeah.
What is next for you? We've talked a lot about
Right.
horrible experience was like, but I'm interested. What are you looking forward to accomplishing and doing next?
Well, the main things that I wanted to do, when you're in federal prison, all I really did was think the entire time. I read a lot and I thought a lot. And I developed visions for Free Talk Live that I wanted to put in place and directions that I wanted to take the show, among them being a new podcast for the show, like a dedicated actual podcast, instead of taking the radio show and calling it a podcast, to have one that actually exists specifically to be that once a week, 30 minutes long. I've already started that. I started that on June the 1st. Pretty much as soon as I was able to resume some of these things, I started. There's also some video projects I want to do that I'm looking forward to getting going. One of those I actually started today, and I think they're going to be a lot of fun regardless. But my main goal is to just sort of get a handle on all of the chaos, which is mostly done by this point. But I got to be honest, like PorcFest really threw a wrench into that chaos that was already chaotic, because I was moving into an apartment while also moving into a house, while also returning to my full-time job, while also doing Free Talk Live. And it's like, oh, I'm leaving for PorcFest tomorrow. Oh, man, I don't have time for that. In prison, I actually wore a watch, and you'd be amazed how quickly it just becomes reflective just to look at your wrist. But there was no other way to tell time. But anyway, that's it for the most part. Is I'm looking forward to resuming all of the projects that Ian and I had talked about 4 years ago that we weren't able to really kick off because we're like, well, we might be about to go to prison for a couple of decades, so why start a new podcast? Why start a new video show since we're not going to be here a year from now? So I'm looking forward to doing some of that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your PorcFest.